The current boycott of travel to the United States by many Canadians is not a sudden whim. It stems from a period of strained relations, largely attributed to the policies and rhetoric of former U.S. President Donald Trump. His administration's approach to trade, coupled with certain political statements, caused significant offense north of the border. Canadians, traditionally close allies and frequent visitors to the U.S., felt a growing sense of unease and disrespect. President Trump's suggestions regarding Canada's sovereignty were particularly inflammatory. The notion of making Canada a U.S. state, even if framed in terms of economic force, struck at the heart of Canadian identity and independence. Furthermore, his branding of Canada as the 51st state was perceived as deeply condescending. These pronouncements, combined with the imposition of tariffs on Canadian goods, created an environment of antagonism. Many Canadians viewed these actions not just as political maneuvers but as direct affronts to their nation and its people. The decision to boycott travel to the U.S. became a way for ordinary Canadians to voice their displeasure and assert their economic influence. It was a grassroots response to perceived slights and aggressive policies, signaling that the relationship between the two nations could not be taken for granted. The impact of this Canadian sentiment is starkly visible in aviation statistics. Air travel from Canada to the United States has experienced a precipitous decline. According to aviation data firm OAG, bookings for flights from Canada to the U.S. through the end of September 2025 are down by an astonishing figure, reportedly more than 70%. Airlines that once enjoyed robust traffic on these routes are now facing a significant challenge. Delta Airlines President Glenn Hauenstein has spoken about a significant drop in bookings originating from Canada. Similarly, United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby reported a substantial 9% year-over-year decline in Canadian passenger volumes to the U.S. The trend of declining air travel is not a recent blip, but a sustained pattern. The cumulative effect of these monthly declines points towards a long-term problem for the U.S. travel industry. The decision by hundreds of thousands of Canadians to forego flights to the U.S. sends a powerful economic message. The empty skies are a clear testament to the strength of Canadian resolve and the significant economic leverage they wield as consumers in the North American market. The economic pain caused by the Canadian boycott is acutely felt in U.S. border towns. These communities have historically relied heavily on Canadian shoppers and tourists for their economic vitality. Towns in Washington state, for example, are currently experiencing severe economic distress. Point Roberts, Washington offers a particularly stark example of this dependency. This small peninsula, geographically isolated from the mainland U.S. and accessible by land only through Canada, is exceptionally vulnerable. Allie Hayton, owner of the main grocery store in Point Roberts, highlighted the town's critical reliance on Canadian customers. The current boycott has, therefore, pushed such communities to the brink, threatening the livelihoods of many residents. The consequences for businesses in these border regions are severe and immediate. The ripple effect of these layoffs and shutdowns extends throughout the local economy, impacting suppliers, service providers, and the overall financial stability of these towns. The economic hardship in these American frontier towns serves as a potent reminder that international relations have tangible, human consequences. The economic impact of the Canadian boycott extends far beyond the immediate border regions, sending tremors throughout the wider United States economy. A significant number of American jobs are now at risk due to the sharp decline in Canadian tourism and spending. Estimates suggest that approximately 280,000 American jobs are in jeopardy, particularly within sectors that are heavily dependent on international visitors, such as hospitality, retail, and transportation. The Federal Reserve has taken note of this concerning trend. In its latest Beige Book report, the central bank observed widespread declines in Canadian spending across various districts in the U.S. The U.S. Travel Association, USTA, has quantified the potential financial losses, painting a sobering picture. The organization estimates a staggering potential loss of $21 billion in travel-related exports if the current trend of reduced Canadian visitation continues. These broader economic repercussions illustrate the significant role Canadian visitors play in the American economy. As Canadians turn away from the United States, they are increasingly exploring other international travel destinations. Mexico and various Caribbean islands have emerged as popular alternatives, offering sun, sand, and a welcoming atmosphere without the political baggage currently associated with the U.S. This shift is not merely anecdotal. Travel industry leaders are reporting tangible changes in booking patterns. Canadians are actively seeking out new holiday spots, redirecting their considerable tourism spending away from their southern neighbor towards countries perceived as more hospitable or offering better value. Airbnb's chief financial officer Ellie Mertz has reported a noticeable decline in Canadian travel to the U.S., with a corresponding rise in bookings for domestic Canadian travel and these more distant international locations. The impact of this shift is being felt directly by the U.S. hospitality industry. Hyatt CEO Mark Hoplamazian noted a discernible change, with Canadian patronage moving away from U.S. resorts towards all-inclusive resorts in destinations like the Bahamas. This redirection of Canadian tourism pounds represents a significant opportunity for other countries and a considerable loss for the United States. The boycott of U.S. travel is part of a much broader wave of Canadian consumer activism, often dubbed the Buy Canada movement. This patriotic initiative encourages Canadians to support domestic businesses and purchase Canadian-made products, thereby strengthening their own economy. Experts suggest that this movement, if sustained, could inject an estimated $10 billion into Canada's economy. A study conducted by Longwoods International revealed that 60% of Canadian adults are less likely to travel to the U.S. specifically because of President Donald Trump's trade policies and political statements. The same study found that a striking 36% of surveyed Canadians had already canceled planned trips to the United States. Canadian businesses are also responding to and amplifying this sentiment. For example, the prominent Canadian grocery chain Loblaws has begun to clearly identify Canadian goods in its stores, often using a maple leaf symbol. This rise in consumer activism reflects a deep-seated desire among Canadians to assert their national identity and economic sovereignty. The decline in Canadian travel to the United States is not limited to air transport. Other forms of travel have also seen significant reductions. Road trips from Canada to the U.S., a traditional and popular way for many Canadians to visit, dropped by a substantial 32% year-over-year in March 2025. Furthermore, overall cross-border car trips between the U.S. and Canada have decreased by approximately 30% year-over-year. The once bustling border crossings are now noticeably quieter, reflecting the collective decision of many Canadians to stay home or travel elsewhere. The U.S. Commerce Department has reported a 17% drop in tourism from Europe and a 10% drop from South America. Factors such as Trump's tariffs, his often imperialistic rhetoric, and negative international headlines about the treatment of foreigners by U.S. immigration officials are seen as significant hurdles. The combination of targeted boycotts and a general cooling of international interest presents a formidable challenge for the American tourism sector. The depth of Canadian frustration with the United States, particularly with the Trump administration's policies, played a significant role in recent Canadian political developments. On April 28, 2025, Canadian voters elected Mark Carney as their new Prime Minister. His Liberal Party secured a plurality in Parliament, a victory largely interpreted as a public mandate for a stronger, more assertive stance in international relations, especially concerning the U.S. The election campaign was heavily influenced by a surge in nationalistic sentiment across Canada. This national pride was, in many ways, a direct response to perceived disrespect and aggressive tactics from south of the border. Prime Minister Carney's platform resonated with this mood, promising a more resilient and independent Canada on the world stage. The political shift underscores a collective desire for reciprocity and respect in international dealings. Looking ahead, the economic consequences for both nations could become more severe if the current trade tensions and Canadian discontent escalate further. The Peterson Institute for International Economics has projected that a hypothetical 25% tariff imposed by the U.S. on all Canadian exports could reduce Canada's GDP by a significant 1.3 percentage points by the year 2027. In response to these potential threats, Canadian political leaders are exploring measures to mitigate the impact of U.S. protectionism. Both the newly elected Prime Minister Mark Carney and his conservative rival Pierre Poilievre have voiced support for freeing up trade between Canadian provinces. The ongoing boycott and the broader Buy Canada movement have already demonstrated a tangible economic impact on the United States. The estimated $21 billion potential loss in U.S. travel-related exports is a stark reminder of Canada's economic significance as a neighbor and trading partner. The path forward requires careful navigation, mutual respect, and a recognition of the deep economic and social ties that bind the two nations.